this very episode of Clusters Talk, we will take a closer look at the EU agri-food ecosystem and speak about how to make food systems fair, healthy, and also, of course, environmentally friendly. In order to achieve that, I want to remind everyone that the European Commission developed the Farm to Fork strategy at the heart of the European Green Deal. That's first. And second, the EU Code of Conduct on responsible food business and marketing practices. Today's Clusters Talks are from Vilnius. We are live from Pate Hotel in the Lithuanian capital because yesterday the European Cluster Collaboration Platform organized the Clusters Meet Regions workshop here in Vilnius, and we continue today after this talk with the matchmaking event for the priority industrial ecosystems for the Baltic region, agri-food most certainly being one of them. Before we begin, I would like to introduce some housekeeping rules. Please use the chat function if you want to comment, if you want to share links, if you want to ask questions, if you want to interact with us in one way or another. The more you interact, the more useful this event is for you. Please note that your microphone is muted as well, and do note that this session is being recorded. I will very briefly get you acquainted with the agenda. Do use the chat function, as I said, if you want to comment. The agenda for today, we will first of all hear some news from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. We will have two keynote speeches. One will be on the current situation in the EU agri-food ecosystem, and then we'll go to the second keynote speech, which will be on challenges and solutions in the agri-food ecosystem and the EU Code of Conduct. This will be followed by a panel debate with three wonderful speakers, and we will discuss how agri-food systems can become more sustainable. We will discuss the challenges that the clusters are facing as well. And at the very end of it, you will hear about funding opportunities that are available as well. So that's very briefly the agenda of today. You'll stay with us, I hope, for the entire hour of this event, and the news from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform come first. Let's look at some news. First of all, do save the date for the 8th edition of the European Cluster Conference. It will take place on the 26th and the 27th of September, Prague, which is Czech Republic. The event is a great opportunity as it brings together cluster policymakers, cluster managers, practitioners, and other stakeholders as well. More information will be published on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, and the link is in the chat as well. Moving on, the European Cluster Collaboration Platform published a survey on cluster managers' skills in preparation of the Cluster Booster Academy. It is addressed to cluster managers, and we would like to hear the following things. What are your daily challenges and priorities as a cluster manager? What are key skills that you would like to develop? What would you like to learn and exchange on with other cluster managers? All of your answers will be taken into account for the Cluster Booster Academy. Do answer the survey before the 16th of May this year, and the link is in the chat as well. As I have said, the chat is where you want to send all of your questions and comments and find all of the necessary links. So thank you for that. Let us begin with welcome speeches, and I want to welcome, first of all, Maive Rute. I hope she's with us, Deputy Director General and Head of the Task Force for Supply Chains and Director General for the Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs at the European Commission. Maive, you're with us. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Good morning. So happy to be part of this opening session today for the EU Clusters Talks, which, as we well know, is dedicated to agri-food ecosystem, and in parallel also taking a look at where the direction that travel is taking us, talking about sustainability of the agri-food industries and their supply chains. So, of course, when we meet today, we all know that this is a rather extraordinary time. We are dealing with many critical issues. be it rising energy prices, shortages of agricultural raw materials, and also actually high input costs in various kinds. We face loss of export markets. There are also logistical bottlenecks. So there are various issues which are making the functioning of the businesses more difficult. But maybe in the very first message I would like to pass is the very first message I would like to pass, at least from the European Commission point of view, and based on our analysis, we don't see any food security threat in the European Union. But of course, the troubles, the various disruptions are those which I would like to look a bit into. And as it was already said, besides of my daily work as Deputy Director General in DG GROW, responsible for industry policy and single market issues, I also have now the task of chairing the task force we have looking at the situation in Ukraine and dealing with the Russian aggression against Ukraine. So in my next few minutes, I would like to look a bit more into the issues that we see appearing, particularly through our work in the task force for Ukraine. And then I also would like to say a few things about code of conduct, which EU has worked together with many of you for the food industry. So first on some critical issues. As you know that EU is largely self-sufficient when we talk about key agricultural products such as wheat or barley, and we are actually a net exporter. However, Russia and Ukraine supply 29% of all global wheat exports. And that is, of course, the reason that international wheat prices are surging. And when we talk about Ukraine, of course, we realize that they would like to export, but they have difficulties because the ports are blocked. In case of Russia, they have deliberately put an export ban on their wheat exports, making the situation more critical on global markets. As to animal feed, the EU is reliant on imports from Ukraine for wheat, maize, and sunflower meal for the animal feed industry. So that, of course, we are very much interested and supporting Ukraine in getting this their exports, our imports going again, and a lot of it depends on solving of the logistical issues. And in the meantime, of course, EU producers are also looking for alternative supply sources. On fertilizers, Russia and Belarus account for approximately, or I should maybe say accounted for approximately 30% of EU fertilizers inputs. And the prices have really multiplied because of these supply issues, but also very much due to gas price increase. And then, of course, as we know, Russia and Belarus have banned their exports or our imports of fertilizers. Fertilizer imports can be sourced from other parts of the world, but we can expect that the price increase will stay for some time. And we also see through our colleagues in DG Agriculture that organic fertilizers are making a bit more of a comeback. And of course, farmers, but also the fertilizer industry is looking for alternative solutions besides of the diversification of supply. And we also hear a big push for more innovation, being, for example, for extracting some useful ingredients from wastewater. But of course, these long-term issues such as innovation will take time. And in already this year, we need to find solutions. On sunflower, the sunflower oil is a critical issue, which is a key ingredient for food processing. And Russia and Ukraine accounted for 75% of the world's production of sunflower oil. So prices are really surging, and as we look forward, this ingredient will very likely become even scarcer for the summer onwards. And there the industry in the EU is looking for replacements. We have talked to our colleagues in DG Sante, dealing with the labeling and so on. So one will have to see how we can treat the scarcity of sunflower oil and what can be then the solutions. A big issue, of course, is energy, and the soaring prices of energy, as well as other raw materials such as steel or wood, have really had already impact on food production costs, both directly as well as indirectly. A very clear example is vegetables, which are grown in heated greenhouses, and this is of course energy intensive. But also drying of fruits is energy intensive, and of course the prices go up. But further indirect impacts we can already start seeing from the high cost of steel or unavailability of cheap steel and iron, and also wood, which has impact on packaging. So there we get signals from the industry that packaging is getting more expensive, and availability is less abundant than before. And then, of course, as I mentioned already, logistics, which still need to be worked on. And on the export markets, the war has also meant loss of important markets for EU food. Russia was the 6th destination of EU agri-food exports, accounting for about 6.8 million worth of exports in 2020. So, of course, this is about food exports, but also for some agricultural machines, harvesting machines, and so on. So what have we been working on? And certainly we are aware of the issues, and we have been working very hard together with other Commission services to find and develop targeted actions to respond to these challenges. So as to the global food security, Commission has committed to support Ukraine in developing and implementing a short-term and medium-term food security strategy. And that is, I think, a very important issue of really trying to make very pragmatic, practical steps of helping Ukrainian farmers to really work their fields, having the fuel they need, having the seeds they need. And also, of course, Commission is engaging in various international multilateral bodies to coordinate policies. So we have had in the magnitude of 500 million euros to help the most affected farmers. This is now within the European Commission, within the EU, and there will be also market safety net measures to support specific markets and increased levels of advances of direct payments, which will start later this year. Furthermore, member states will also be allowed to derogate from certain greening obligations this year, so that more agricultural additional land could be brought into production. We have also worked on European food security crisis preparedness and response mechanism. The Commission has set up European food security crisis preparedness and response mechanism, which stands for bringing together European and national administrations and private actors, basically throughout the whole food supply chain. And this mechanism will carry out, first of all, mapping of risks and vulnerabilities throughout the supply chain. And then, of course, this allows us to develop also appropriate mitigation measures. A further point is that the temporary crisis framework for state aid has been extended. Some of you may know that this crisis framework, state aid crisis framework, was already created under the COVID circumstances, and now this has been extended so that member states which are willing could also then grant support to either energy-intensive industries or possibly also food industry enterprises and food industries specifically mentioned under the extension of the crisis framework for state aid. And then some member states have also decided to make use of the existing flexibility in EU legislation on maximum residue levels of pesticides for imports, which can be used in duly justified cases, as long as food safety and consumer health is not compromised. Regarding the issue of labeling of agri-food products, the Commission has allowed competent authorities and member states some flexibility in enforcement of food labeling provisions. And this is exactly of interest to situations where some of the ingredients need to be changed, and then this has to be, of course, reflected. When it comes to the single market, the Commission has reminded all member states that it is of utmost importance that the single market is kept fluid, that the goods can properly be moving between member states, and certainly we do not want to see any internal market barriers being erected or export restrictions being created. And to this end, Commissioner Breton, together with Commissioner Wojciechowski, have sent a letter, particularly to the Hungarian authorities, in order to address the issue of their export restrictions. On a broader range of things, we are also working on a single market emergency instrument, which is a way of really looking at the lessons we learned from COVID and also from the crisis we stand today, and then try and find ways to strengthen our preparedness and our coordination capacities. We have launched a call for evidence last week for the single market emergency instrument. And it would be really helpful and useful if you would also look into this call for evidence and send your feedback to the Commission as well, so that we can fine-tune our initiative. And the call for evidence is open until 11th of May. So single market emergency instrument, send us your input as well. We are then also working with Ukrainian side, trying to facilitate and speed up their access to the single market. And you are aware, of course, that Ukraine, together with Moldova and Georgia, have applied for EU membership. But beside that, in parallel, we continue working on so-called ACA, which is a way of looking at Ukraine's quality assurance systems, so that their goods could be in compliance with EU internal market regulations as early as possible. And we hope that these efforts would indeed facilitate the access to EU markets already in not too distant future. But of course, still some work needs to be done. And I really must commend our Ukrainian counterparts who, despite of the war ongoing, have managed to send in already very important inputs to the Commission on their membership application, and the situation that we can then assess for the readiness. Now, a couple of last words, or a couple of words on the EU Code of Conduct on Responsible Food Business and Marketing Practices, which is one of the first deliverables under the Farm to Fork strategy. And of course, we all realize that more than before, food systems are becoming critical, and we see also the geopolitical global importance of it. But similarly, for our own consumers in Europe, it's important that we have sustainable food systems. So the code proposes a strategic vision to all agri-food industrial players, and the aim is to help to go through this transition towards more sustainable practices. But we believe that its key value really is in its focus on collaboration. Partnerships were created as part of the process, and the code will present future opportunities for collaboration among the signatories of this code. So in addition, DG GROW also offers various support mechanisms for the sustainability of agri-food actors, and especially for food small and medium-sized enterprises. We will mobilize our Enterprise Europe network that is there for SMEs needs. We also have, of course, our cluster collaboration platform, which will facilitate information exchange and hopefully create new business opportunities across Europe. And that we believe that clusters can really play an important role in implementing and making this code of good practices really familiar to all the players. And then our clusters collaboration also hosts it's a long name, European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center. And so the Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center is the one which provides case studies for sustainability technologies, including also then sustainability technologies for agri-food. And we are working on having a database with best practices, and I believe this could be really useful source of inspiration. So I'm looking forward today to hear also from Food Drink Europe's Director General, Dirk Jacobs. And of course, I hope that you will take good note of what is being discussed here. You will get inspiration, you will find partners, so that the event today would be really useful, and the discussions would be inspiring not only for you, but also for clusters, organizations, and for the Commission. So thanks a lot, and wish you a fruitful day.
Thank you so much, Maive. Thank you for listing all of the efforts to support Ukraine, and also facing all the challenges, for listing all the challenges that Europe will be facing because of Russia's war against Ukraine. We will discuss those challenges in greater detail in our panel debate in a few moments after we hear from our second keynote speaker. And I want to thank you now again, Maive, and move to our second speaker, who will be also speaking about challenges, and it's Dirk Jacobs, who is Director General of Food Drink Europe. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining. We're eager to hear from you.
Good morning, and good morning from Brussels. Unfortunately, I can't be with you today in Vilnius. I have a love for the Baltic states because my wife is Latvian, so I come very often in that part of Europe, and it's a beautiful part indeed. Indeed, as Ms. Rutte has already said, we're in extraordinary times today, and I like to call this the times of 4C crisis. The 4 C's being COVID. We're still struggling with the aftermath, hopefully, of the COVID pandemic, with pressures also still in Asia that are not looking very good. The second one being the C of conflict of war, which obviously is very imminent and dreadful, and has to be seen how that will develop. The third C being climate change, because despite all the sort of the focus on war and on the pandemic over the last couple of years, the issue of climate change has not disappeared, and I'll come back to that. And then bringing that all together, perhaps, is the last C, which is the C of cost, and also there, this is not something that has started today. In fact, our industry and the food system at large has already experienced an increase in cost since 2007, since 2008, when commodity prices globally went up, and this led to, at the time, also to social unrest. You remember the Arab Spring in the Middle East and North Africa, and so you can see that food is actually always and sort of a centerpiece in these kind of discussions, and we're seeing that very actually today in Ukraine as well, and how these pressures are coming together. So we're in a moment of a perfect storm, a dreadful storm, which makes it very difficult for businesses to operate, but which also shows how important it is that our food systems are resilient, and that in the end, a resilient food system is also a sustainable one, and vice versa. And that is why also as a food industry, we are so committed to the farm to fork agenda that has been put forward by the European Union. And we really believe that this is the right way to go. There have been some discussions over the last couple of weeks and months. Should we abandon the ambitions and the objectives of the farm to fork strategy? But I think it's even more important than ever that we accelerate the actions to make our food systems more green, to make sure that they are more resilient, and that we rethink a little bit the way that we are producing and consuming food in a changing environment. And even what we have, or what the Commission has put on paper in the Farm to Fork strategy in 2020, which was just before the COVID pandemic, by the way, that has already sort of had the sort of the implications of the new environment that we're in. Obviously have to be taken into account. So while we can, of course, we should definitely stick to the objectives that the Farm to Fork strategy sets out, which is also that we want to be the first region in the world to become climate neutral by 2050 in the Green Deal, but where the Farm to Fork strategy provides this road towards sustainable production and consumption, where we do need to look at reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, where we do need to look at biodiversity, nutrition and health, animal welfare, and so forth. This is going to be absolutely critical, not just for the sake of society, but also for business. And I'm always saying that if our food industry wants to exist and thrive in the next 10, 20, 30 years, we now need to take those actions and make that happen. Now, in a moment of crisis, this is easier said than done. And our industry, which consists of 289,000 companies, has 99% of SMEs, so the small and medium-sized enterprises. And of those 99%, I think the vast majority are micro enterprises. That means that these are companies that have less than 10 people, employees in their companies. So having now had a few chats with companies all over Europe, sort of asking how do you deal with an increase in the input costs that Ms. Rutte was referring to, the energy prices that have spiked, transportation costs or container freight rates that have almost quadrupled, sourcing problems, availability of ingredients, and so forth. How do you deal with that? And then at the same time also invest in sustainability measures. And admittedly, this is a very challenging thing, because the first thing that is top of mind of these companies is to survive, to find new export markets, to look at like packaging and finding new ways to source their ingredients and so forth. So in the immediate term, and I'm really talking about immediate term, support will be needed in forms of liquidity support, in the form of loans, in the form of different measures that can be provided. And I'm very grateful that the European Commission has gone that route. I think sort of looking at the medium to long term, as I said, the Farm to Fork and the Green Deal objectives are still there. And that's where the Code of Conduct comes in. The Code of Conduct was one of the first deliverables of the Farm to Fork strategy. And the Commission was very brave in not doing the typical Commission exercise of regulating, but instead sort of working together with stakeholders and co-creating a document, a common ambition for how we would like the food system in Europe to look like, and what are the ambitions, what are the aspirations that we want to work towards. And if I just take a few figures, 800 million people in the world are still going to bed every day with a hungry stomach. They have nothing to eat, or very little to eat. At the same time, 1/3 of the food that is produced in the world is wasted, is not being eaten, because we are wasting it, we're throwing it out either at consumer level, or in the supermarkets, or elsewhere in the chain. And of course, that's a disgrace. And bringing that to Europe, around 40 million people in Europe cannot afford a quality meal every other day. That means that even in Europe, we have very big pressures to make sure that people can have a decent meal. And of course, with the war, this is only going to be exacerbated. This will increase. So this is the right time now to start thinking about what is the kind of future that we see, and there food has a strategic role to play. The Code of Conduct was therefore created last year, the beginning of last year, in a virtual setting because we were in the midst of the COVID pandemic, with a wide range of stakeholders, with all actors in the food chain, from the farmers to the manufacturers, retail, food service, and so forth, but also with consumer groups and environmental NGOs, international organizations like the FAO, the OECD, the European Commission, from different angles, from DG Environment, DG Grow, DG Santé, and so forth. And that sort of was the first time after the publication of the Farm to Fork that all stakeholders would come together and start discussing on sort of how do we feel about Farm to Fork? What are, in our view, the needs to move towards more sustainable production and consumption? And that led to sort of the formalization of 7 aspirational objectives. And I hope that you have had a chance also to look at the code, and you will find more detail there. But really looking at the different stages of activity at the agricultural level, inside the factories, inside the supermarkets, but also towards consumers. And I think that farm to fork approach in the code also shows that sustainability is not just looking at greenhouse gas emissions at farm level, but it is also looking at how can we shape consumption of more sustainable options. And of course, the middle part of the chain, which is the food industry, the retail sectors, the food service, and so forth, they have an important role. We can work both upstream and downstream to influence and help shape demand. So speaking on behalf of the food industry, we're working a lot with farmers. 70% of what the farmers produce in Europe goes into processing. So that means that we need to work together. And so we're supporting regenerative agriculture, for instance, making sure that also next generations can use the soil and that they are growing their crops on, and making sure that farmers are also rewarded for sustainability initiatives. The same goes for nudging consumers into more healthy, sustainable options. And you will find some examples in the code as well. So we managed to put the noses into the same direction. It's very nice, of course, for the European Commission to come up with a strategy and with a policy document, but the people on the ground need to co-own it in order to make it happen. And I think that was the value of the code, that it brought these different groups together. An important part of the code is that companies can put forward commitments. And we've now 116 signatories of the Code of Conduct, which are mainly major companies for the time being, but also associations in the food and drink sector that have committed to implement tangible, quantifiable commitments that will be monitored, that will be sort of discussed in terms of what kind of progress are we making, are we on the right track, what are the kind of hurdles that we are experiencing. So this is a process that will be complementary to all the legislation that is going to come in the coming years, but is an important vehicle to make sure that that business agendas and policy agendas remain on the same track. If not, I think that then we lose a lot of time. So the investments that are being made today in sustainability, which of course now is suffering a little bit, perhaps due to the war, these investments are important to be long-term investments that go on a similar path than what the policymakers intend to do. And I'm very proud to say that actually in Europe, we have a great track record when it comes to food in terms of safety. I think we are one of the safest food systems, let's say, in the world. We are known for quality, for our diversity of food. I think now the next step is to also become the leader in showcasing the sustainability of our food systems, and I think we really have a chance there. So I think we have now this discussion on food security and sustainability together. If we are able to get that right, because it is not going to be an easy one, to be honest. There are some difficult trade-offs to be made. If we cannot source our sunflower oil anymore from Ukraine or from Russia, then what alternatives are there? And do we need to go to palm oil, or do we need to go to rapeseed oil, and so forth? Sometimes these discussions will be very complicated, and I think we need to be mindful of that. But if we don't forget about the long-term vision, and if we work together in partnership, and I think that's also where the clusters play an important role, if we help the SMEs to identify the business case for sustainability, I think then we can come very far and show that we are the leader in food sustainability worldwide and give the good example. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dirk. Thank you for your speech. You have emphasized several times that Farm to Fork objectives are still there, but if I could still ask you a question, I just want to double check if you're saying that it will be now a bit more difficult to reach them, and is it safe to say that before the objectives are reached, the food supply will remain secure in Europe, but it will be less accessible for the poorest of Europe?
Well, the issue of price and costs is very complicated, and I think the longer the war lasts, the longer we're in a situation of crisis, the more pressure on costs, and I think these cost pressures will go on for a while. But food security as such is not at risk. Food supply is not at risk here in Europe. The knock-on effects will be coming through price increases that are commodity price increases at the global level that may prevail if a war lasts longer and if we're in crisis mode for a longer time. It is very inevitable that consumer prices of food will increase, just like we are seeing other prices as well. Our main concern is with the energy costs that are going up. And I think given that food has such an important role in people's lives, we think that the food sector should be seen as a priority sector in terms of access to energy, so that we can continue to produce food for people at affordable prices. And I think that's an important consideration that also the Commission needs to look at in our view.
Okay, thank you so much, Dirk Jacobs. Thank you for your insights. We will discuss, we will take the policy down to the level of clusters, because it has been mentioned by Dirk as well that business and policy agendas should remain on the same track. We will find out now if it is on the same track, and we will attempt to answer the question, how can the agri-food ecosystems become more sustainable? For that fruitful discussion, we have invited three wonderful speakers, which I'm going to present to you now. Armāns Lējas Krūmiņš, who is project manager at the Latvian Federation of Food Companies. Good morning.
Morning.
We are also joined by Eugénie Cornu, who is international project manager at Vitagora. Good morning, thank you for joining. And also Kristina Šermukšnytė-Lešūnienė, who is general manager at Agri-Food Lithuania, which is a digital innovation hub. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I will first of all allocate a minute each for you to present your clusters. It has been said many times that collaboration is key, and therefore clusters are important in the process as well. Armāns, let's start with you and your cluster.
I will start, not women, okay. I'm representing food products quality cluster. It is the biggest cluster in Latvia. We have 165 members, and we are working since 2013. And we are doing quite well with export activities, with innovations, new products and new technologies. And our goal is, of course, to help our members into export, because Latvia is very small, you know, smaller than Lithuania, and any development for companies is possible only in export, not in our Latvian market.
Okay, thank you for your short presentation. Eugenie?
Yes, good morning. I'm very honored to be here today. I would like to thank the organizers for this wonderful event. I am working for Vitagoa. We are a French agri-food innovation cluster. We have today more than 600 members covering the whole agri-food value chain, really from farm to fork. We represent all sectors, especially those, of course, in France, and we are a cluster established since 2005 in France. The clusters have been established under President Nicolas Sarkozy in 2005, so we have now 17 years of experience. We have our headquarters in Dijon, in France, but we have offices in the Paris region and also in Japan and in Rwanda in Africa. And we are focused in helping and supporting our members in their daily agri-food challenges, in their growth, in innovation for their research and development projects, as well as in entrepreneurship with our Agri-Food Acceleration Program. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina?
Hello, so I'm representing Agri-Food Lithuania. First of all, we are a cluster. We have 92 members, and the cluster was established in 2011. And we are uniting, I should say, the whole stakeholders from the whole food value chain. So starting from farmers, going to the food production, and finishing up with the end users and HoReCa sector. And we are the only cluster, not only in Lithuania but in Baltic states, which is also a digital innovation hub. So on the basis of the cluster, digital innovation hub was created, and that means we are working very hard to help our food value chain to transform into digital and green for the upcoming period, and working with the main objectives, of course, working with the deep tech, with different technologies, innovations, and helping our members and stakeholders in changing food systems. And also last year we have become 8th food hub in Lithuania, so which is also a big honor, and trying to participate in the change of the food system.
So as far as I understand, the Latvian and the Lithuanian clusters, they're a bit newer, right? They have been established several years ago, while in France, this is a long tradition, and you have said that you have 600 companies in your cluster. And how many clusters there are, agri-food clusters there are in France in total?
In France, there are approximately 4 clusters really focused on agri-food, and there are other clusters focused, for example, on bioeconomy or, for example, plant-based products, also for the cosmetic sector. So really, agri-food, we are 4 clusters in France.
And would you tell us what you're doing to address the code of conduct at your cluster at this very moment, and how is the current situation, Russia's brutal war against Ukraine, affecting that? Armand, let's start with you.
We are more focused on innovations, because innovations, it is very important step towards circular economy, towards all these goals, and also we have to listen our members, and we have to speak with our members regularly to explain them what we can do for them, what we can do to reach these goals, and what they need, because not always needs of our members are the same as needs for European Commission or for these policies, and we need somehow to merge it that it will be good for our members and good for all policy.
So what is the worry of them at this very moment? What is the biggest worry? What is the area where you have to explain to them that you have to continue working and we will support you and everything in the end will be fine as long as you try to reach the goals of sustainability?
Yes, war in Ukraine, there are a lot of bad things happened after that, exactly for food producers, for all food chain. And it is first a lack of fertilizers, then problems with oil, rapeseed sunflower oil, and then also supply chain to retailers because every day prices of energy are going up, and of course prices for raw materials are going up, and food producers must change the price for their products. But it is not so easy to work with retailers, and it is also one big problem for food producers. But of course, the two biggest problems is energy and oil. And now it is almost no sunflower oil, and instead of sunflower oil, we could use rapeseed oil. But there are regulations that rapeseed oil must add to fuel, to diesel.
So it's one step back towards sustainability, right?
Yes, yes, but we need to stop this demand to put food oil into fuel, because it is 4% of all diesel fuel must be from such rapeseed oil, and it would be much better to take away this rapeseed oil from diesel, not take away, but stop to add and start use it in the food, and it would be very good. And in energy, of course, if we speak about sustainability, we have to accept the nuclear energy as one of the main source of energy in the future. It is for sustainability.
And also you have mentioned fertilizers. The Commission representative said that organic fertilizers are coming in more again.
Yes, organic fertilizers, it is good, but it is more expensive. And at the end, it will be more expensive food in shops when we all go to shop, and we see that food will become more and more expensive.
Christina, would you give us a couple of examples in terms of what you are doing to address and to reach the objectives of the Code of Conduct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, first of all, I should say that when we talk about changes, so the biggest changes come through the crisis. So on the one hand, we have huge crisis with the war. We just had COVID. It's not going away yet. But on the other hand, the society is changing. We're changing the point of view. When we talk about the food system, it's not only businesses and not only stakeholders that can make the change. So the society is also a very big foundation on that matter. And what we do, when we work with our stakeholders, when we work with our members, of course, everyone has doubts, especially now facing this food security crisis. And Maida mentioned that already European Commission is preparing the scheme for ensuring food security. But we need to remember, for example, Ukraine is called a basket of world food. So this year it's being predicted that only 30% of the whole harvest is going to be. And Ukraine was providing food to those lower income countries. So it's again those people who already were facing some food securities, they are facing even bigger challenges. So we as a community, as a whole European Union, we need to work with ensuring the food security, which has become a national security question. Again, I think as Armand has mentioned, innovations, we must turn to those, to implementation of digitalization and implementation of innovative, higher added value products, and making, for example, agri-food with the added higher added value sector, because when we thinking about the raw materials, we need then to think about what kind of products, innovative products, alternative proteins that we're going to be working with. And of course, the challenges that we are facing right now with the fertilizers and stuff, those could be lowered also with innovative solutions, like, for example, using drones at the farms, predicting what exactly your crops need and how much of the fertilizers, pesticides and chemicals you can put in. So these are very important points, and we have also to remember, probably my colleagues will agree with me, that agri-food is the most conservative sector and least digitalized. So now it's an opportunity to implement all those digitalization and implement the innovative solutions into the sector. And I think clusters play a huge role because we unite all the stakeholders. We are talking a lot about resilience, collaboration, and changing food systems. So this is what clusters come as a main player.
Okay, innovation is key, and if we talk about less grain coming from Europe, planting more crops here in European Union, is that not a solution? Isn't that a direct implementation of farm to fork strategy, Eugenie?
Well, of course. I mean, the terrible war has started, and despite my deep sympathy, of course, for the Ukrainian people, now the war has begun, and we need to give hope to the producers and be optimistic and take this as an opportunity to improve local production. All the countries that were dependent on imports of cereals, of oil from Ukraine and this region, well, obviously, they should take the opportunity to produce more local, which will create shorter supply chains and actually answer some of the objectives of the European Union and of the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy. It is an opportunity. I mean, we need to see it as an opportunity to improve European food systems, and if we create these shorter supply chains, if we can prove that we can actually live without this dependency on Russia or on the Ukrainian grains, for example, then it will be also a proof that our food systems are improving, and that will be also a proof that we will be able to help Ukraine rebuild their food systems when the war will hopefully soon end.
Thank you for that, and we have questions coming in from our audience, and I do remind everybody that they can use the chat function to send their questions or comments. And there was one from DG Agri. Could you please share good examples of initiatives that went beyond mandatory environmental or animal health and welfare standards? Eugenie?
Sure. Yeah, sure, that's a great question. How can we go beyond the actual recommendations from the European Commission? Maybe I can give an example. Like in France, we are a big country. Each cluster is being partly funded by its region. So we are based in Burgundy, Franche-Comté region, and we get funding from this region to indeed go beyond these recommendations. And I would say, for example, that we have a project funded by the region to help our companies become more sustainable, and I'm talking about the triangle of sustainability. When we hear sustainability, we think immediately of environment, which is great, but we shouldn't forget about the two other aspects of sustainability, being the social aspects and the economical aspects. So we have a project ongoing funded by the region, and I'm emphasizing on that because we need this public funding to implement these projects and to help our companies to, encourage these companies and increase their sustainability, talking about the trilogy of sustainability.
There's a question related to chain links, to supply chain links to Africa. What about the links and potential for Africa at this period? Does anyone want to take that?
Maybe I can take it because we have an office in Africa, so I do have some knowledge about the African supply chains that we are implemented in Kigali in Rwanda, and we are helping SMEs to grow their business there. There is, Africa is an extremely rich agri-food region, even though it is not exploited as much as it should. Some African countries actually relied a lot on Ukrainian imports, so they will suffer a lot from that. But there is a great opportunity as well to develop the African supply chains, and we are helping African SMEs and small businesses to import their food products to Europe, starting with the entry point in France. But there is great hope for the African food systems actually in the future.
To start wrapping this up, German agriculture minister has said that making agriculture more sustainable and resilient is an important step towards more independence from Russia, and we have said that this war no matter how we're willing it to end as soon as possible, can also be an opportunity. Christina, you have mentioned innovations. What else? What else is there to make farm to fork strategy to be reached more easily?
Innovations. I can say innovations, and again innovations, because all this situation have to change very fast. Our production, our supply chains, our all about that, and innovations will be the main key for all changes.
Innovations and more collaboration?
Of course, more collaboration, and I should say that we should not only focus on making agri-food industry more autonomic, but all industries in European Union. And we should be talking, as everyone said today, with more integration into the EU value chains inside. So in that case, we can achieve more.
Eugenie, would you have anything to add?
Yes, I would say I would like to wrap up what you said, because we have innovation, we have collaborations, and collaboration between actual sectors, like you said earlier, Christina, not only focusing on agri-food, but collaborating with other sectors like the digital sector, obviously, will help us definitely to overcome these barriers and these challenges.
Thank you so much for all your insights. I will just remind you that there are some opportunities for financing, funding opportunities from the European Commission. First of all, European Call for Testing and Experimentation Facility for Agri-Food. The selected project will develop reference testing and experimentation facilities with a focus on full integration, testing, validation, demonstration, and where appropriate certification of advanced AI-based and AI-powered robotics technologies for the agri-food sector. Fields of applications are precision farming solutions, food processing, wholesale, retail, hospitality, and food services. The deadline for that is 17th of May. Also, secondly, alliances for sectoral cooperation on skills. Alliance for Agri-Food shall implement a coherent and comprehensible set of sectoral or cross-sectoral activities, which should be adaptable to future knowledge developments across the EU. Proposals should include design of continuing vocational training programs, developments of emerging occupational profiles, design of related core curricula. The deadline for that is the 15th of September, and it's under the Erasmus Plus program. The link you can find in the chat, and by the way, thank you everyone who asked their questions on chat, and you can find all the links there. Let me remind you of the funding opportunities from cluster partnerships as well. F2F, Health Matters, internalization support. European project Farm to Fork, Health Matters, is an internalization accelerator for innovative agri-food SMEs. The deadline for that is 17th of May 2021, this year, and it's published on the project website. Before closing, I want to again thank all the panel speakers who represented clusters and have raised their concerns and stressed what is important for everybody to go on a path of sustainability further, despite all of the challenges that remain. Before closing, we invite everyone who hasn't done so to register on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. Please also find the registration link on the chat. We will see you next at the next EU Clusters talk on the 11th of May on the topic of raw materials. It will be fully on Zoom. If you haven't registered yet, please do that. We are looking forward for your participation. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for joining our debate and our Clusters talk, and we wish you the good rest of the day. Thank you so much, and see you next time.